Hey everyone, my name is Ezekiel. Good to have you back. All right, so in this video, we'll be looking at custom health indicator, which we are going to be building on Spring Boot actuator. Now, what is Spring Boot actuator? Spring Boot actuator basically helps you tell if an application is up. It has this endpoint liveness check and readiness check, which is in use by Kubernetes. It also reviews metrics to Prometheus, but in this case, we'll be checking to see if the application is up and want to do some custom logic, right? Maybe we want to check if an app endpoint is up in our case, or we have a scenario. And without saying too many things, let's just get into it to see how it works. All right, so what I'm gonna do is just get into it. So first things first, we're gonna bring in our Spring Boot actuator. So how we're gonna do that, since I'm using Ultimate, I'll just go in here. I'll just click on that Add Starter. I'll go back here, just click on Add Starter. Then just bring in actuator. Remember, the other way to do it is just go to start.spring.io. When you get there, just type in actuator and bring in this same Spring Boot actuator. All right, so that is in. I'll just go in and refresh this. Okay, so that we have. Then without doing anything, let's just go ahead and run this application. Let's just run it as it is. Let's run it as it is. Okay, so the application is running. So I'm just going to bring up a tab. Let's just bring up a tab. Okay, so we have a tab here. So let's just go to localhost 8080 actuator. All right, so you see, it tells you immediately that the application is up. So let's print this. It tells you that the application is up. So this is basically what actuator does. One of the few things rather that actuator does. All right, with this done, we can expose several other things, or you could actually control it. So we're gonna go in and then do what we need to do. So in this case, I'll come in here, I'll add in another part, I'll tell the endpoints I want it to expose, right? So I'll say management, endpoints, so endpoints, then web, then include, I want include, exposure include, then I'll just put in a star. Please note, star means expose everything. Since it is just a demo, we want to expose everything. But however, probably in later videos, or rather in later videos where we are trying to build an application, I will show you how to expose only what is needed. I'll show you a little bit now, but others later. All right, so we've exposed star. But please note, this will not work if you're using YAML. If you're using properties, say application of properties, this star will work. If you're using YAML, this star is seen as something very critical in YAML, so it will break the flow. Let's just start this. You'll see what I mean. When we start this, can you see? It's complaining and it doesn't understand its character. So when you want to escape a character, just put it in quotes, in single quotes, and that should do the work. All right, so let's run this again. Great. So you can see that is working. So let's go ahead and bring in this again, and let's run our endpoint. You see, I've exposed everything. Before now, remember, I was just revealing this. Now let's click on this. Can you see? It's showing so many things. So many things you could explore. The conditions, the beans in the entire application, the conditions. Let's just take a look at this. Look at the beans. You can see it's showing so many details, right? So many details. If we check properly, we would see our custom beans we basically created also, right? If we check, you see our custom bean. But that's not what we're trying to actually assess, or what we're trying to do today, right? We want to see how to create a custom indicator, meaning when this endpoint comes up and we actually go to the health, because if you see, there is a health path. If you look at it critically, there is actuator health. You see actuator health, right? When we go to actuator health, we want to be sure that our endpoint, in the case that is scenario we're using, is up, right? That shows the application is going to run smoothly. All right, so now if we go to health in itself, health is limited. Health just shows you only basic things. Readiness, liveness up, readiness up, but it's not showing more details. In order for you to show more details in this part, you need to add another configuration. So you add the configuration management endpoints, not endpoints this time around. Then you see this health show details. Health show details is by default never, right? This is the default. You see, default is never. We're going to turn it to always. But in your case, say you have some endpoints you want to reveal when you authorize, then it will be when authorized. So meaning when you hit the endpoint and you're not authorized, you will not be able to access it, right? So that is not the focus of this video. I just wanted to mention that. So let's put it at always, and let's run this again. And when we run this again, And when we click on this same endpoint, see what will happen. Can you see? It shows more details. It shows you the disk space. It shows you the liveness state. It shows you the readiness state. It shows you that the ping is up. It shows you several other things, which is pretty cool, right? That is pretty cool. Now, like I mentioned, assuming you are working with Kubernetes, Kubernetes has a way to tell if an application is ready to start receiving traffic, or if the application is up or it has died. That way, you use these two properties called liveness state and readiness state. I just saw that you mentioned in Kubernetes, you can look at Kubernetes documentation. You see something called liveness check and readiness check, or rather readiness probe, liveness probe. So readiness probe basically just check if an application is alive. Then so readiness probe checks if an application can start receiving traffic, and liveness probe checks if an application is alive. I hope you get the difference. You can rewind this to actually listen to that again. Awesome. All right. So with what we've just said, so let's go ahead and create something custom to include our own custom logic within this, so that when you call the health endpoint, you're able to tell that, hey, this scenario is up. Let's say your application is totally dependent on the weather service, right? So if the weather service is not up, your application should not be running. So that way, you could always add something like the weather service in this place to tell if it is up. If it's up, the application should actually, it fires up to say the application is good to receive requests. If not, it says the application is not good to receive requests. Please note something very critical. If any of them is not, if any of them is not up, the general status will be down. If one of them is down, general status is down. If all of them is up, the general status is up. Please keep that in mind, and we are going to simulate that. All right, so let's just go in and create our custom health indicator. So I'm going to go ahead and just create a package. I'll call it health indicator. Health indicator. All right. Now I'll go ahead and create something called coffee. Coffee hot. Coffee hot health indicator. Please note, right? Please note, this is very key. This is very key. You need to add the name, this name, right? If you don't add the name, whatever name you place in here is what the property will be registered with when you call the health endpoint. This is very key. I need to mention this. I'll show you guys. You know what? Let's start with something different. I'll show you guys. I will come back to this for you guys to see exactly what I mean. So I'm going to start off by changing this to custom, because custom is not telling us anything. But let's start with this. Then you're going to implement health indicator. You see, it's complaining, saying you need to implement some method. So let's go ahead and implement some method. We only need to implement this health method. So I bring in this health method, then I'll make it a component, meaning it's now part of the system, it's now a bean, right? So this is primarily what we need to actually focus on. So this in itself is now there, right? So by default, I'll just go ahead and return health is up. So yes, you see, it's already there. We have this health up build. You see, this basically works. So let's go ahead and restart this. All right, so this is restarted. Let's go ahead and call our health endpoint again. So let's check. So if you look at it, can you see it just says custom? Custom is up. You don't know what custom is, and custom is derived from the name you use here. So in this case, well, the endpoint we want to hit is like a coffee hot endpoint. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this to coffee hot, because that's what we'll be using. The coffee hot. All right, so let's refresh this. Awesome. So when we actually run this again, and as you can see, this has changed to coffee hot. I hope this makes sense, guys. So it shows that this is up. Because this is up, everything is up. Now let's go ahead and make this, let's turn this to down. So this is down. So let's rerun this. Now the issue with this is because one is down, everything is down. So this is down. You can see this is down. You see the status? If you look at this clearly, if you look at this clearly, if you trace it down, this is the general status for everything. It shows that everything is down. Remember what I said earlier? If everything is up, it says that up. If one is down, it shows that everything is down. So this is a good way to know if your application is actually okay to receive requests. Let's say you did some deployment and you fired up your endpoint, and somebody's trying to reach the endpoint. Say, hey, it's not working. You can just call this to see if the major endpoint you're calling is up or down. All right. Since this concept is now clear, you now know how to create the health indicator. Let's just go ahead and create something cool. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and say, let's look for a sample API. Sample API. So I'm going to use the sample API. I just found it on just a random API. I'm going to use this guy, which is the Coffee Hot. All right, this Coffee Hot. So I'll just go ahead and comment it in here. All right, so let's go ahead and just push this up. Okay, all right, so we have this. Then I'm just going to go ahead and just start wiring things in. All right, so all I'm just going to do just something very basic, but I'm sure you can do something more interesting. I'm just going to create a try block. I'm just going to use REST template or REST client. REST template, I think, was introduced in Spring Boot 3, right? I think 3.2.0 or so, or Spring Boot 3. I can't really remember now. Or use REST template. Anyone that is more convenient for you, please can you go ahead. I know I have a knowledge about both, so I'm just going to stick with REST templates. I'm going to implement REST templates, initialize the REST templates. So REST client, I mean, REST client equals to REST clients. Then I'm going to have a builder.build, right? Then I'm going to pass in the base URL, and my base URL, I'm going to pass in this base URL. This is what I need here. Okay, now that I have my base URL, so that's basically set it up. Then I have this, and I'll just go ahead and say REST client dot get, because it's a get I want to do. Then I want to basically add another URL. So the URI, basically the URI I want it to call. So the URI takes two, you see, it takes a URI, it takes a string, it takes if you have other values like path params or request params and the likes, right? But I'm just going to make it this dynamic one that we have over here, right? So I'm going to place this here, so that settles that bit. Then lastly, I'm just going to say let it accept media application JSON. Then I'm just going to retrieve, right? Retrieving, and what does it want to retrieve? I want to retrieve to entity. To entity, because this endpoint returns a list. So let's try it out. Let's try it out. This endpoint returns a list. You see, it basically returns a list. So we should be catering for a list. So I'm going to say this guy is going to return a new parameterized type, because that's the way to get it in. Now, what are we expecting? What are we expecting? So I'm going to go in here and create a Coffee Hot DTO. Coffee Hot DTO. All right. Now, I want to teach you guys a trick, a very cool trick. First off, go to your plugins. If you're using IntelliJ, this is pretty cool. Go to your plugins. Your plugins. Now, when you're in your plugins, look for, I've already installed it, look for JSON Format Plus. This is how it looks like, JSON Format Plus. Now, when you have it, now you can then see how to use it. I believe when you go in here, you can see how to use the additional infos on how it can be used. Basically, the details are here, right? So you have what's new, reviews, and the likes, right? All right. So, okay, I'm actually checking it. Sorry, I was checking something else. So for the JSON Format Plus, if you go to the overview, right, it shows you how to wire it in. Very cool. Then usage, you just need to use something like this. So everything you need is basically here, right? I already know the shortcut. What I would do is I'll just basically press Option S, because I'm using a Mac. I think on the Windows it will be Alt S. Now go to, let's move this first. Go to this part. I'm just going to copy everything. Once you've copied everything, go to this part. Once you're here, do your Alt S and paste everything in here. Once you paste it, then click on OK and OK. Could you see what happened? It generated all the DTO properties I need. It does that for you automatically. So that is one more information for you guys. I believe that will be very helpful. Now, since you're using JSON property, if the title, if what is in the JSON property and the field name is the same, you don't need to add it, right? You don't need to add it. If they are the same, you don't need to add it. You only need JSON property if they are different. Let's say this is ingredients underscore. So this is ingredient underscore, and this is not Java format. You can just copy this and place this here, right? And map it to ingredients. That's how it works, so that you can have a more conformable Java way. All right, so I'm just going to remove this guy, remove this also, remove this. So this conforms to what I need. All right, so that tomorrow, in case they add new properties, it doesn't break application, I'll add ignore unknown properties true. Okay, so now that I have the Coffee Hot DTO, let's go back to our health indicator. Now what I want to receive is a list. So what I want is a list of coffee DTO, right? So I'm going to call it response entity. Pretty cool, guys. All right, so with this done, I'm going to have a catch block. Catch block should return down for me. All right, that being said, now let's now write a custom logic to tell when it is up and when it is down. So I'm going to say if response entity.getStatus code is successful, meaning I was able to access it. Pretty cool. Then I'll say health.up. Now health.up also has some intermediate property, or should I say intermediate action. You see, with detail. So I'm going to place it with detail, right? And I'm going to build it. But you know the details is a list, and it's really much. So what I'm going to do, you can also have details. Details takes in a map directly. You see, details takes in a map. Why detail takes in just a string and an object value. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to come in here. I'm going to pass in, let's use details, right? Which takes in a map. Just takes a map directly. And I'm going to say map because it just brings in a map. I can just use object mapper. Let's pass in an object mapper. Object mapper. Remember, I'm just doing this on the whim. All right. Object mapper. Let's bring in an object mapper. Right. Object mapper. Yeah. All right. So this, I'm using Spring Boot 4 here. So it has changed. So you should be mindful to know that this now comes from tools.jackson. Right. Instead of faster. The Jackson, I think something like that. All right. So now that I have this with details, I'm going to basically bring this in, which is the object mapper. Then I'm going to say object mapper dot convert value. So I'm just converting value from, since I have my details here, I'll say from this dot get. I'm going to get, let's look at it now. Response. Yeah, I'm going to get the body dot get first. So get first was introduced, I think, in Java. I think in Java, I can't remember, probably Java 17 or Java 21, I can't remember. So instead of you doing get, then passing 0, this is valid, you can just do get first, right? Having get first, then I want you to convert it to a map.class. A map.class. So it just converts to a map.class, so it satisfies what is required here. So that's basically what I need. Now, in this case, I'll then do an else. In case it fails, just return health down. So health should go down if it's there. Then I'm just going to return the status. So I'm going to return with detail, and I'll just say status. Let's return status, and I'm just going to say return the status code, right? This will give me the status code. Then for this, I want to return the exception. And the cool thing about this is this also returns an exception. So you have health.down. If you look at dots, you see there's a with exception. So with exception will just give me this, and I can just pass in the exception, right? With exception, with exception. With exception, that takes in a treble. And if you know, the base of every exception is treble. Treble gives you exception to runtime exception all the way to the top. So I'll just pass in the exception directly. All right. So as you can see, I believe we're done with everything we need to do. Let's just go ahead and restart this. All right. So this is up. So let's go ahead and just run this again. So this time around, we're going to run our HTTP localhost actuator health. I just run this and let's see the results. Amazing. You can see I'm returning the first object. So you can see this now have coffee hot. These are the details, and I converted the first object into a map. And as you can see, that works nicely, and the general status is up. Now let's see when it fails. Say this fails or any exception is thrown. I'm just going to go ahead and just put in some random value here, right? Passing some random value here. I'm passing some random value. I had to do a backspace so I know we started to do F. Apparently this does not exist. So let's run this. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this and see what's going to happen. And can you see? This comes with an error saying there is an resource access exception, meaning there's a resource access exception and I'm unable to get this. And because it's down, this is down. I hope this is super useful, guys. So if you have a major component or components you have in your application in which they are really important before your application can get started or should be used successfully, you can go ahead and add everything in your custom health indicator, and this will show from the very first get-go if your application can be used or should not be used. I hope this has been this has been very much useful. This has been very much useful. I'll see you guys in the next video.